understand the mystery. First take a look at the history. The words we use will give us clues. So join us now in Church Chatter.
Everybody, welcome to the Church Chatter podcast, where we unpack a different church word or phrase each week. I'm Sam. I study Christian language and culture.
And I'm Dillon. I'm an ELCA Lutheran pastor, and our dog is with us today, and she's very needy. So
yeah, it's June 24th, and if you're on the East Coast, or actually a lot of parts of the country, there's this heat wave. So our dog is with us today upstairs, where we have a bunch of air conditioners on and going. So she's with us today. Okay, episode 39. So if you see her or hear panting, that's what that is. Her name's Magdalene, like Mary Magdalene. We call her Maggie. Episode 39.
Yeah.
We are doing horses and chariots for a lot of reasons. There's a lot going on in the world, as everybody knows right now, so I think it's appropriate. Also, Independence Day, July 4th, is coming up. I think that's also very appropriate. It's an appropriate time to talk about all of this.
Oh, and you love the topic.
I love this topic. It clips
I do
something.
too, but to a lesser extent.
Once we talk about horses and chariots, it's something that people already know intuitively, but people don't talk about it much. So we're going to talk about horses and chariots. It's episode 39, horses and chariots. So like always, let me light this candle. This candle's burning really unevenly recently, which is why it's lasting so long. It looks like it's full, but it's actually just burning very crooked. I'll put it back here so you can see it maybe a little bit. And my notes, you can see it here, but do you see my drawing?
Oh, that's fun.
Here's a horse. If you don't know what a horse and chariot is, a horse, as we know it, I'm an artist here, and a chariot. Don't come at me either with oh, that's not historically accurate. I know. It's the best I could do. The chariot is the part that the horse pulls, right? And then there's a warrior in there with a little Roman hat. So There's my drawing. And you can see my notes for today with the Roman hat. Do you not picture it Roman?
Well, the Romans definitely had chariots, but no, when I picture a chariot, I don't picture Romans.
What do you picture?
I picture Egyptians.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mesopotamia, Babylonia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I picture Egyptians. I think of the Pharaoh,
really?
Obviously, but I think of Romans. Roman Empire is my Roman Empire.
Oh, and definitely Greeks and Romans had chariots. I mean, that's well documented. Yeah. But when I think about it now, I think because, honestly, real quick, if we could do a side note.
Side notes are my favorite part.
You know why I think about Egyptians in particular with chariots, and
Exodus,
to a lesser extent, Babylon, Mesopotamia. Mm-hmm. But the reason I think about that is because I grew up with Sunday school stories about hearing about chariots, and it was always linked not to Romans, but not the book of Romans, but I'm talking about ancient Romans. It was always connected to the Egyptians.
And do you remember what you learned about chariots in Sunday school?
Just that they raced through the Red Sea, which is the Reed Sea, but that's for a different time. And just that.
Oh yeah, we should do
God. Just that God saved or God delivered the Israelites from enslavement, and also that there was many Egyptians that died.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I think of the Roman Empire. Was it?
Both ends.
So, for those of you who don't know, once a week my parents live an hour and a half away, and once a week my parents like to see our girls. So we wake up at 4:30 in the morning, and we meet my parents at 5:30 in the morning at a halfway point. So yesterday we woke up, our whole household was up at 4:30 in the morning. We were in the car, and Dillon and I were talking in the front seat, and I was talking about the Roman Empire, as I do, and Dillon looks at the clock and he goes, "It's not even 5 o'clock in the morning and you're already talking about the Roman Empire." So that's why I picture Romans, because so much of what I study is rooted in the Roman Empire. But that's funny that you picture not the Roman helmet and the Roman soldier.
No, I
also picture gladiators a little bit.
Oh, sure.
I picture Game of Thrones. Game of
I
Thrones has a
picture
lot of chariots and horses.
for some of our viewing or hearing audience who have grew up in this would have came out, I don't know, in the mid 2000s, I forget, was The Prince of Egypt, which was a cartoon telling of Moses growing up as a prince of Egypt and then going back to his Israelite roots and leading the people into liberation and freedom.
Yeah.
With the help of God. So as soon as I think of chariots, I think of Sunday school.
Yeah.
Number one, and then I think of the Prince of Egypt.
Yeah. Chariots are pretty historical, I think. We don't really have chariots in today's, unless you live in Pennsylvania like we do and you see Amish.
Oh.
Do they call those chariots, though?
No, those aren't chariots.
Yeah,
chariots are...
Same technology.
Yeah.
Same idea.
Chariots have two wheels.
Yes.
And are held up by either one horse or a multitude of horses. And they are usually, some of them had decorative, they call them gates or doors at the back.
Yeah.
But most of the time they were opened. They were like a little half moon shaped.
Yeah.
And
the riders were standing up.
They were standing up. Usually someone would, they could be a single rider or they could be a double rider. Some of them were bigger and they could fit multiple people, but that wasn't overly common. And then one person would ride in terms of guiding the horses. It was very common also, other ones would have sheaves of arrows and someone would be, they would be releasing arrows, shooting bow and arrow from the chariot.
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of hinting at what this is, but chariots are kind of historically placed, but horses are still very modern. But when we think of horses today, we think of farming oftentimes, at least in our part of the world. But we have to remember that in ancient...
Well, especially in Pennsylvania.
Yes. In ancient biblical societies, because it's plural, because the Bible does not come out of one culture, it comes out of many cultures and times and peoples.
Really?
Yes. Hot take there.
Hot take.
But we think of horses as kind of this tool for farming in our culture, but that's not what it was, because they were not a full agrarian culture in many biblical societies, meaning they were not, farming was not the center of their economy yet, right? That came later.
It eventually did come, but
farming was
not
a part of their world for sure, but they were not fully agrarian yet.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? So
there was a lot of moving around.
Yes, and horses were not used on farms. Horses and chariots, this is the cultivating thing that you need to know about this episode. Horses and chariots were weapons of war, right? So when we think of weapons of war today, we think of machine guns, drones, missiles, bombs, Tanks, yes, thank you. Tanks. Horses are like tanks, by the way. Tanks, a Hummer, yeah, like the big Humvee, but horses were like ancient tanks, right? Helicopters, yeah. We think of all those things. Horses and chariots were the most advanced weapon of war that the world had seen up until a certain point in history. So this is really foundational to understanding a lot of biblical texts, which we're going to talk about today. So I'm looking down at my notes again to make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, let's jump into the biblical references, all right?
Yep.
All right, let's start with, I'm going to tell a little story here. And I'm really skipping a lot. This episode, horses and chariots are all throughout the Bible. But let's start in Exodus. I've got my New Revised Standard updated version.
Start there, find that, and then I just want to tell a little bit of primarily horses and chariots, particularly chariots, but obviously the horses go together. In the ancient world, I just want to offer the kind of places regionally where these were used.
Mm-hmm.
So horses and chariots, primarily for warfare, were being used in ancient Egypt, in ancient Assyria, in ancient Babylon, in ancient Greece, and in ancient Rome. Those were the places that these were being used. They were used other places, but those 4 to 5 places where you will see the most evidence for them, historic evidence for them. and all of them, the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, and the Romans, they were all kind of highfalutin, affluent empires, ancient empires of the day.
Yeah, empires. This episode is gonna talk about power and empires, like most of our episodes. So let's just take a real wide lens view, right? Exodus obviously is the story of the Hebrew people being liberated from Egyptian enslavement and the Pharaoh. So if you go to Exodus chapter 14, verse 28, I'm going to read it right here. So it's the story of them crossing the Red Sea or the Reed Sea. They're crossing the Red Sea. We're definitely going to do an episode on that eventually. I just wrote it down. So they're crossing the sea, and you have this image of the Red Sea closing, right? And it goes, the waters returned and covered the chariots and the chariot drivers, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea. Not one of them remained. That image to me is really powerful, because a lot of times we just think about the Israelites on the other side of oh look, their enemies were defeated. But what we have here, and I say this boldly because this is something in my own faith formation that I've come to realize, God takes sides, and I used to hate that, and I still very much identify as a universalist, I think, on a long enough timeline, and that's complicated. But God chooses sides, and it's not the ones with the tanks. It's not the ones with the horses and chariots, right? And here we have an actual image of the waters separating for these enslaved people so they can be free. Whether you read this literally or not, I don't really care. I'm not really interested in that.
Right.
Any way you slice it, you have this ancient story where God is on the side of the oppressed, the people who are just enslaved, and the waters close in over weapons of war. That's really powerful stuff.
Well, yeah, and not only is it powerful, but there's some major allegorical and metaphorical imagery going on here. That comes to us from the ancient stories of both the Israelites who would become the Jews, and also even in our early Christian understanding of things, in that water both saves and cleanses.
Yes.
Cleanses means purifies, corrects, restores.
By the way, fire cleanses too.
Yes, fire cleanses too.
Fire cleanses too. It does not always destroy. It molds itself as it cleanses.
I always think that when I baptize someone at church, there is a specific prayer. It's known as the flood prayer. Because the flood, this is not that, but the flood both saves and destroys, or renews, or corrects. And the water of the sea that came in on the Egyptians who were oppressing people and liberating the Israelite people. I always, in the prayer before that I pray over the water, to bless the water in baptism, it recalls this very story. It says, through Moses and the prophets, you restored your people through the waters of the sea, from slavery to freedom.
Yeah.
And so
and
there's a lot. There's a lot going on there.
The writer intentionally chose the images of a horse and chariot, horses and chariots, because these are weapons of war. This is an image that the writer wants people to get, is that these weapons of war are being destroyed by God, not lifted up. And then we get to Deuteronomy, right? So skip forward a little bit. Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 16, it reads, "Even so, he must not acquire many horses for himself or return the people to Egypt in order to acquire more horses, since the Lord has said to you, you must never return that way again." So here, Israelites are being instructed not to acquire many horses.
What chapter was that again?
It's chapter 17, verse 16.
Yeah, verse 16. And there is a specific, it might be in your footnote. I don't know if there's footnotes in yours. But
there are, but not on this one.
Okay, so a lot of times in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 16, There is so it's speaking to the Israelite people as a whole, but it is specifically speaking to the leaders, the kings of Israel, to not collect. So it is, yes, general, but also more specifically leaders, government leaders.
Saying
In
not
this
to collect horses. And if you just read this without much context or really thinking about what a horse is,
you'd breeze right over it.
You think like, okay, but horses were weapons of war.
Right.
Here you have, I hate the phrase God's people, because everybody's God's people. We're all created, but you know what I mean? God's people. You have God's people being instructed, do not collect weapons of war. Don't do it. Don't stockpile weapons of war. Don't be people of war. I don't want you to build up your army. I don't want you to build up your defenses. What's interesting is in this translation, it says you must not acquire many horses. So it's not saying no horses, in this,
correct,
but it's saying many, meaning like you can't make the military your identity.
Well, correct. And in order to have lots of horses, you had to have some means. Yes. Or you had to have some treasure built up.
Oh, that's a good segue into what I'm going to say next.
Yeah, and so that's why the specificness of the kings would have had means to acquire lots of horses for their chariots, and so therefore there was kind of this general understood and interpreted prohibition on the kings of ancient Israel in Deuteronomy to not collect these horses. Yes. And again, they had the means to do it, so there was a little temptation there.
Well, and you fast forward a little bit, if you know the story, you know that King Solomon had many horses and chariots and disobeyed the instructions and the way that his people were supposed to arrange
King Solomon
their
did a lot of
things. So if you fast forward to the book of Isaiah, you have the prophet Isaiah saying this. If you go to Isaiah chapter 2, verse 7. So you've got Exodus, where the horses and chariots, the weapons of war, are destroyed. And then you've got Deuteronomy saying, I don't want you to have so many horses, Israel. Please don't do that. We don't want you to have a lot of weapons of war here. We're trying something else here. And then you go to Isaiah. Their land is filled with silver and gold, and there is no end to their treasures. Their land is filled with horses, and there is no end to their chariots. Isaiah is calling them out, saying, you did the very thing. You came full circle, which humanity is really good at not learning our lesson, even when we are specifically told, right? So,
and the prophet Isaiah, or as I like to say, the prophet Isaiah. So there, I won't tell the story, but there was a professor of mine at Gettysburg who always used to, in the lectionary readings and when he would preach, he would always say that the form and the pattern and the voice and the syntax that you should take when saying Isaiah is Isaiah.
Isaiah.
Yeah.
Isaiah.
So, the prophet Isaiah. So I think it.
We say Israel, but I like Israel.
Yeah, Israel.
But I also hear Israel.
Yeah,
I like
sure.
Israel.
Yeah, sure.
That's how I hear it. Yeah.
So the prophet Isaiah is looking back to Deuteronomy. So when he is putting together putting together his writings,
well, he would have been a student of the Torah. He would have known this stuff.
He would have been reminded that. Hey, a couple years have gone by, and we're not following what was prescribed to us.
Yeah. If you are interested in prophets and prophecy, Walter Brueggemann.
Oh, fascinating.
Rest his soul.
Yeah, rest his soul. Rest his soul.
He has been foundational for me recently, and he wrote a book called The Prophetic Imagination. Also, Father Richard Rohr has a new book out called The Tears of All Things. And that's about, I think the subtitle is something about prophecy for the modern outrage generation. I don't know, something like modern age of rage or something like that.
Is that
it's a book about prophetic.
Yeah, but by
Richard Rohr.
Oh, Richard Rohr. Yeah.
So those are two books, especially The Prophetic Imagination.
By Walter Brueggemann.
I never understood prophets Now I do. It seems so clear to me now.
And
But so Isaiah is a prophet, and like all prophets, they are calling out power structures.
Yeah.
Prophets are always lifting up the oppressed, marginalized voices. So if you are a Christian, I assume if you're listening to this podcast, you're at least somewhat interested in Christianity. I don't understand how you can align yourself against the oppressed and the marginalized among us.
Well,
how could you possibly read voices like Isaiah and not understand that he's calling out the people with the drones? He's calling out the people with the bombs. He's calling out.
Well, right, and the prophet, I think the office or the role of the prophet, the ancient prophet, is a lot of times we modern people want to make the ancient prophet a fortune teller.
Yeah.
That is not...
Prophets didn't tell the future, they told the truth.
They told the truth about what was going on in the present day, so that
and warnings about what would or could happen if you didn't change direction.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So
yeah.
Prophets were speaking about present issues, present dangers, in order to, exactly what Samantha said, in order to correct them now in the present, so that they don't go into the future. So that we don't make these mistakes in the future. So it does. Prophets do speak to the future, but not about what is necessarily to come, but what we can correct now, so that it may not come.
Yes.
But prophets are not fortune tellers.
No.
And I'm not speaking against fortune tellers, although that could be
prophet, that can be another
that
episode.
could be a topic. But prophets are not fortune tellers. So Isaiah is not saying, don't round up all these horses and chariots so that in the future... He's saying actually something about the past that is currently going on in the present that he doesn't want to continue into the future.
Yeah.
So he has the three... past, present, and future that he's trying to drive home and pointing back to Deuteronomy.
Yes. And there's a reason. So I just want to summarize to really make this point before I read this last passage. Exodus, God destroyed the horses and chariots. God destroyed the weapons of war. Deuteronomy, God's people are being instructed not to stockpile and build up their horses and chariots or their weapons of war or their military or their army, right? And then you have Isaiah. Fast forward, what did they do? There is no end in sight to their horses and chariots. There are so many. They disobeyed, right? Which is a problem. And then you go to Psalm chapter 20, verses 7 through 8. And I just want to backtrack really quick. Remember in Isaiah, it said, their land is filled with silver and gold. There is no end to their treasures. Their land is filled with horses, and there is no end to their chariots. You see here military and money being connected. And put a dog ear in that. Put a pin in that, because I'm going to come back to that. Like money, having too much money and having too many horses and chariots or weapons of war, it's a problem, right? So then you go to Psalm 20, and it reads verses 7 through 8. Again, this is the NRSV updated edition. Some take pride. I like that word pride here.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Some take pride in chariots and some in horses, but our pride is in the name of the Lord our God. They will collapse and fall, but we shall rise and stand upright. So you can be proud of your horses and chariots. You can be proud of your weapons of war. Or you can be proud to be a follower of God and peace and that way of life. You can't do both, is what it's saying. So if you find yourself hearing others, or find yourself maybe being pulled in the direction of like, I'm proud of America. I'm proud of this war. I'm proud of our horses and chariots. If you're interested in Christianity and you're interested in this ancient book of wisdom at all, and you take it seriously, you can't be proud of your war horses and your chariots and trust in God. Some trust in chariots and others trust in God. You get to decide which one you're going to be. You get to decide. That's a choice you make. But the reason I talked about the connection between money and treasures and war, tools of war, weapons of war, is because I think it's really interesting that here in the United States, on our money, it reads, "In God we trust." And those are the dollars that we throw at purchasing more weapons of war.
Right.
We slash our budget all the time here in the U.S. We don't slash our military budget to the extent we slash other budgets. So this stockpiling of money and this stockpiling of weapons of war, they are connected. This self-preservation is not a stance Jesus took.
Right. And some people might be thinking, so are you saying that, I'm going to just play an advocate here, are you saying that we can't protect ourselves? Are you saying that the military or those who are serving in the military are nothing? Are you?
No, that's not what we're saying.
No, just play. Are you saying that national defense is something, that is a joke that we shouldn't spend our money on? If you're asking yourself those questions, or if you think that we are dismissing being able to protect a nation or protect a family or protect a local region or whatever, or that we're disrespecting service members who are in the armed services or veterans, that is not what we're doing at all. I don't think either one of us would ever do that. We honor those who serve, and yet when we are only looking at how can we pour more money into a what did President Eisenhower say? The military-industrial complex. If we are pouring money after money into our chariots, which is our military-industrial complex, in order to just wait to hit that button to destroy anybody who is different from us or has a different way or whatever, that's not where we should be focusing, because we're definitely not focusing, and I am going to be pretty clear about this because I feel very strongly about this. We pour all, if not much of our money into the military-industrial complex, and then when those service members come home, we give them very little in veterans benefits. And so it's like, it's okay when you're fighting who we don't like, or we want to bomb who we don't like, and we just want to keep pouring money and spending money. But in order to take care of the people who did voluntarily go in, or in some wars did not, they were drafted, and then they come home and they're not taken care of, we are placing our funds in an uneven way. And we're putting and placing our love of horses and chariots over the care which God calls us to do, which is to bring peace and harmony and diplomacy and care for those who are oppressed. And you can care for those who are oppressed. You could say to somebody, it's hard to not talk about the current issues going on in the Middle East right now, although that's what I'm thinking about. You can say your behavior is not acceptable. We will not accept this type of violent behavior towards us or towards other nations. And you can say we want to stop to that. But that does not mean that you need to go about adding to a bloated military-industrial complex and not care for those who serve.
Yeah, bloated is a good word for it,
Bloated?
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts on that.
Sorry, that was just a monologue.
No, that's good. It has to be said that I'll just speak for me in this moment. It's always evolving and changing, but in this moment, it's about living in the tension of, in an ideal world that I think is at our fingertips and not that far-fetched or radical. I think it's right there if we can just grab it. There is no war. We don't, and I, as a feminist, believe if we get some more feminine voices up in there, we could collaborate, we could sit down and discuss these huge, big issues, right? But instead, we just exchange bombs for bombs. And by the way, as Americans, we're the only country who has ever dropped an atomic bomb. And we dropped 2. So, thoughts on that?
There's other nations that dropped atomic bombs, but
Tell me who.
I believe
Google it real quick.
I believe Germany dropped an atomic bomb. Yeah,
We're gonna find out.
I'm almost positive. We are known as I believe the first.
Let's Google it right now. Nations who dropped atomic bombs. The United States is the only nation that has dropped atomic bombs.
I stand corrected.
Okay.
What I'm thinking is other nations have atomic bombs.
Yes.
Yes. I'm sorry. But drop them, yes, you're correct.
Right.
I'm sorry.
We are the only nation. That's all right.
I'm sorry. I've had atomic bombs on my mind for a while, and I stand corrected.
Yeah, other nations have them, but we are the
But
only ones who have
to drop them, correct.
And
yes.
we've done it twice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we are conditioned from the time that we are born under this military industrial complex, it can make reading the Bible difficult. We might miss some of the central themes of like, no, don't stockpile weapons when we are the nation stockpiling the weapons, right? And we've normalized it. So
and dropping the bombs.
Right, and using them.
It's also...
Wait, I really want to say this before we go too far away from it. It's about living in the tension of like, yes, we shouldn't need war. We are human beings. We have language. We can communicate in countless ways. We should be able to sit at a table and figure out like these difficult things, right? And understanding that we are born into certain structures and certain paradigms. I also am grateful to have a military.
Oh yeah.
I don't want certain countries who could take over and make me cover my body and not have a voice as a woman. I don't want certain areas to take me over.
I agree.
I want a democracy to be protected. I want freedoms, and some parts of the world, their leaders will protect those freedoms for me. And other parts of the world would not. Their leaders and their extremists would not.
Absolutely.
Right? And I'm not generalizing any group here. I'm just saying that there are.
Right.
And living in that tension is really difficult.
Of course.
It's very difficult to do. So I just want to say, like, yes, of course, we live in a time, we live in a certain cultural, political paradigm where, yeah, you need a military. Again, what I read said in Deuteronomy, do not have many horses. It didn't say have no horses.
Correct.
And that's interesting too. Like, it's
Correct.
not saying don't have a military. It's like, yeah, but, and as somebody who studies language, the rhetoric that I've been hearing in the past week about some Christians in our context saying, just proud to be an American, it had to be done, with little to no humanity, little to no concern for the people who are being harmed. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like, it's all very tricky, and I don't have a hot take on everything that's happening in the Middle East. I don't even have a firm stance. I can hardly wrap my brain around all of it. But I do know that the language that we use and the posture we come at it with matters. It's not nothing. Like, just in our everyday lives, the way we discuss it matters. And I think that we should just soften towards it a little bit. And as Christians, remember what Exodus, the Red Sea swallowing it, and Deuteronomy telling us not to collect weapons of war, and Isaiah, the prophet, condemning God's people for stockpiling weapons of war, and then Psalm 20 saying, essentially, do you trust in God or you trust in war? Right. You can't do both. Do you have pride in being a follower of God, or do you have pride in your nation's military? You can't do both. Right. You can respect your nation's military.
Oh, absolutely.
Without having pride.
And you can honor the people who serve.
You can honor, yes,
those who are both living and those who have died.
Yeah, saying I am proud that people are killing other people on my behalf.
That's disgusting.
I would say it's not Christian. I'd even say it's not biblical. I hate that word biblical if you listen to our last episode or 2 episodes.
But then some people would say, so let's just play advocate again. Because some people would say, well, just about 15 minutes ago, are you basically saying that it's okay for God to destroy people in the flood? So there is that argument. And we could, if that's something that people are interested in and they would like to write us or comment, we could dive into that. There's a lot of nuances there. So that is not necessarily the same thing, and some people might say, oh, that's semantics. It's really not, actually.
Oh, the people who say, oh, it's just semantics, they're not my people.
Well,
every word choice that we make matters.
Yeah, and the stories and the way in which they're written, specifically in their original language, what they are trying to convey. There's a lot to unpack there, and it's very beautiful. It's very wonderful. But
you had stuff about Zechariah. No?
Yeah. So interestingly, moving from the Hebrew scriptures or the Old Testament sections on horses and chariots, and kind of moving into the New Testament or the Jesus tradition. Remembering that Jesus was also a practicing Jew. Who would have known these texts, Deuteronomy and Exodus and the Psalms. It is interesting. There is a passage in Zechariah 9:9, which talks about Zechariah was one of the prophets of the Old Testament of the Hebrew Scriptures, talking about God, or one who is coming in the name of the Lord, would not be on a war horse, would not be on a I'm paraphrasing here a bit, but would not be in this type of
a military
stance or a type of imperial general war type person. And then in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 21, verse 5, it also discusses that Jesus coming in as symbolizing peace, not conquest, not peace. And so, again, we have talked about this on other episodes, but in the Gospels, specifically Matthew, but in others, you see the story of what we now know of Palm Sunday, where Jesus comes through the gates of Jerusalem just like the emperors would, but not on a military dressed horse in power and prestige and with empire, but comes in on the humble donkey, the colt, with in a very different way. And so Jesus sets the tone which the prophet Isaiah spoke of, the prophet Zechariah spoke of, which Exodus spoke of, which the Psalms spoke of. In this tenor, Jesus, whom we believe is showing us the fullness of God, is saying, no, not conquest and empire with chariots and horses, but the humble colted donkey riding into the city, welcoming people, bringing people to peace, which Christians every single year, the Sunday before Easter Sunday, Palm Sunday, we celebrate that.
Okay, so I love this so much because you said earlier in the episode that I love this topic, and I do in a really big way. I talk about it often, the horses and chariots. If you really think about it, I think most people know, yeah, they used to be weapons of war. I get that. Like, if you really think about it, people know it, but they just skim over it like it's nothing. I was conditioned to dominate. I was brought up in a culture and a time and a place where you win. You win. That's what you do.
Well, yeah, we're surrounded by that. Sports.
Yeah, and can I tell a really quick story? Okay.
You don't have to ask me.
I might have told this story before. I know you know it. I know you know it. I might have told it many episodes ago. I remember, so my brothers were wrestlers, and they were very good wrestlers. I ran track, and I was on the swim team. I was captain of the swim team. I never won. I showed up.
Right.
A lot, so I was captain.
What was your participation?
I was on the team, but I wasn't.
Which is quite beautiful, actually. So there's questions of merit there, with were you captain of the swim team because you won a lot of swim meets and
I was captain
races,
of the swim
or
team.
were you
Because I showed up to every
because you were
practice.
dedicated to the team?
Right. There's
Not
something,
through
yeah.
merit, but through acts of there's
Right.
there's something there. That's quite beautiful, actually.
And I actually couldn't tell you why. Like, I showed up to the 6 a.m. practices before school that were optional, and I showed up to the evening practices every day. My parents didn't push me to do that. I don't know why I did that. Again, I think I was just conditioned to be a disciplined person. I also come from a family where playing sports is just what you do.
Sure.
I don't remember my parents ever saying, you have to play, but it was also just like, yeah, you play a sport every season. That's what you do.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually
and
very
I
lovely.
liked it, but I just wasn't like good at it. My brothers, though, they were athletes. Anything they did, they were good at it, except baseball. They were not good at baseball. But they wrestled, they played football, yada yada. They were good wrestlers. I remember sitting in the bleachers. You know this story.
Mm-hmm.
And it was some big thing. I don't know. One of my brothers was about to lose. Like, there were seconds left. It was one of those things. I was sitting in the bleachers. And you could see he stood up. There were a couple seconds left. And they, like, repositioned to start wrestling. And something came over him where his whole demeanor shifted. And, there was a determination of, like, I'm gonna win.
Mm-hmm.
And he did. He pinned the guy. And he won. Even though it looked like he was about to lose, he won. And that was, like, a big thing that I think got him to States or something. I don't know. Whatever. So a family friend of mine, one of my friend's parents, leaned over and they said to me, why don't you have the desire to win like that? And they used the word competition or competitive. They said, why don't you have that competitiveness in you? And this was an adult in my life.
And how old were you about? I mean, I know the story, but I don't.
I mean, my brothers were in high school and I'm older than them. I was probably a junior.
Oh.
And they were, if they were in high school, then I must have been a senior.
No, but still, you were a young...
So I was like 16 or 17, because I was a younger senior. But
right.
When he said that to me, what he was trying to do was to hand me a certain shame about not being competitive. But that put me on a certain direction. I doubled down. And I don't know why. There was something in my bones. I doubled down after that adult said that to me. Of like, you know what? There's another way to be. And I might not... I just remember swimming or like running a race in track. And I'd like go as fast as I could. But I'd see people pass me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't care. Like, I didn't...
Well...
Like, some people would like lose. And they'd like get angry afterwards. I just never... cared.
That's how I.
But I was conditioned to care.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean?
No, I feel the same way. I was not the greatest tennis player. I was decent. I enjoyed playing tennis. I still enjoy playing tennis. If I lost a match, whether I was playing singles or I was playing doubles,
you don't have competitive.
It didn't matter to me. It was about playing the game. And the camaraderie between.
Did you ever feel pressure to dominate or to win them?
No.
Anywhere? No.
No,
Okay.
I have. Okay. I have very.
Because I did.
I have very little of that. Mm-hmm. I also didn't come from a family that really gave a rat's rear end about winning and losing. I didn't really. Not that there wasn't competition, or that could be moderately healthy, but it was about exercise. It was about sport, in playing the sport and enjoying the sport, not about whether the winning and the losing. Sometimes I think like people, they lose when it comes to sports in particular. This is my personal thought. They actually are not. They actually aren't paying attention to the beauty of the sport and what the sport can offer. They are concerned about the outcome, whether you win or you lose. Yeah. They could really care less about... Some people care about the plays and the strategy. That is true. But most people that are engaged in sports, they care about the conclusion, the climax, the outcome. Are you a winner? or are you a loser? Is the team a winner or a loser?
This is related to horses and chariots, but I want to say that maybe this is a little too personal, but so I'll just be vague, but something really formative in my childhood. I grew up around athletic excellence. I had a friend who was Olympic level athlete. I had brothers who went to like nationals and states and all that.
Right.
They were very good, which means I intimately saw the underbelly of what excellence does to a person.
Sure.
I saw what it does to identity.
Right.
I saw people around me who were very good at what they did grow up and not know who they were.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that domination and that winning, I also saw people love the sport or the activity that they were doing. There's love in there too, but the domination of it, I just saw, and then so I had that in my childhood, and then this adult said to me, "Why aren't you competitive like that?" Trying to make me feel bad because I'm not a competitive person.
Right.
Which is interesting because, I think that you would agree, tell me if my self-awareness is wrong, I'm a disciplined person.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a person who, I'm not competitive in that I don't need to win. When I decide I am going to do something, I am going to do it. And that's it. I don't know what the word determined.
Determined.
It's not about domination, but there's a determination to me.
Right.
But I, at a young age, I remember when I was 16 or 17, that adult leaned over at the wrestling match in the bleachers, said that to me. And I decided, I don't care what you say. I won't be a competitive person. I won't go out there wanting to beat other people and win over other people. I won't do it. I won't live that way. And then I stumbled into Christianity. I'm like, oh, these are my people. They're crying together, and they're like collaborating versus like clobbering. Do you know what I mean?
Yet some people have not. We talk about this a lot on this podcast, but
it's okay to want to win.
So you and I have entered. I mean, I was brought up in the Christian faith, but you and I have entered a Christian tradition that focuses primarily or much more on not having to be the winner. Not having to tell everybody what they need to do or where they need to go. But
written by the losers of the war here.
Correct. However, there is other strands or groups or traditions or factions of the Christian faith that they're doing the very thing that we're actually speaking against, which is saying they're the only ones that are right. They're the only group that is right. They're the only ones that have the truth, and they need to make everybody exactly like them. That's not necessarily the whole story. And I wouldn't even argue it is the story. So there is that. We are not a part of that. But some people grew up like that, and some people are still captive to that.
Yeah,
which is a competitive kind of
posture.
we have to win the war.
Yes, and the people who are going after power.
What?
If you're somebody who has a voice in Christianity, you'll be called a heretic.
Sure.
As we have been called many times.
Called. Yeah.
Which is crazy.
You know, Jesus was called a heretic too.
Yes. Yeah. Can we actually? Okay, we should do an episode on heretic.
I mean, I'm not. So let me be clear. I'm an ordained pastor. I am to the best of my ability stray away from or steer away from clear heresies, and I do. Yet at the same time, this calling a person saying that's heretical or that's heresy or that's unorthodox or whatever, that I shouldn't usually. I'm going to say a bad word, so if children are around, I'll give a second. That is bullshit. Mm-hmm. People from the very beginning, People have questioned the prophets, the ancient prophets. People questioned Jesus because they thought he was a heretic. They questioned his followers because they thought that they didn't have the right things. The early church, the ecumenical councils, questioned one person's thing over another. This is always
Welcome to the
welcome to the tradition of living together. I always think of, can I tell, we ask each other if we can tell stories because we don't want the podcast to be 3 hours. But I always think of the parable of Jesus, and I love the old traditional phrasing of it, the parable of the wheat and the tares. And a fascinating parable by Jesus in the Gospels, I should say, and it's talking about letting things grow together, not necessarily even grow together, but grow side by side, and leaving it up to God as to what needs to be taken care of at the end of time, whatever that may look like at the harvest. So this idea that you and I need to tell people and rid them out all the time. Now, if someone is doing something to hurt oneself or hurt a group, yes, we can talk about that and say that that's not appropriate behavior. But if you're going around calling everyone a heretic all the time, and you're saying that you only have the right whatever, we could look many places. But we could also look to the parable of the wheat and the tares and say, listen, there's always going to be things that grow alongside of each other. That doesn't mean we have to necessarily embrace them, but we're not called to go out and be mean and nasty and call people out for every single little thing. Leave it to God,
Yes.
and God will correct that in God's time.
So for me, and we're going to circle back to horses and chariots with this, for me, it's not an efficient communication tactic. It ends
It's
any
a deterrent.
conversation. Right. It doesn't, it's not efficient. So if you watch Couples Therapy with Dr. Orna, which we do, it's a very good show. Is that HBO? No, it's on Paramount Plus.
No, Paramount Plus.
It's a really good show, Couples Therapy. So she's a psychoanalyst in New York City, and she has these very diverse different kinds of couples, and they sit in front of her, and she does a session, and it's recorded, and we get to watch it, and it's so good. And where was I going with this? Don't let me lose it. Oftentimes, all she's telling, you've got this couple there, right? Oftentimes, what she's helping them do is just communicate. So something she asks a lot, which I have in my head now, is, here's an example, like, okay, to the wife, okay, you want your husband to fill in the blank, but you're screaming. How could you communicate in a way that would be efficient and actually make him want to X, Y, or Z, or vice versa? A husband, oftentimes it's the man who's like not communicating at all, but wants his wife to fill in the blank. So she's asking him
To have dialogue.
Okay, how could you communicate in a way that would actually be efficient and get you what you want? What is a healthy way that you could communicate that would actually encourage this person to do what you want them to do? You know what I mean? And I feel like it's the same way with this heretic stuff of like, you're a heretic, or to circle back to horses and chariots of like, you hate America. What's like, wait. What I'm hearing is you want me to love America, and you're just making the assumption that I hate America. It's a conversation ender, and it's not an efficient way. Like, it sounds like you want me to love America. By telling me I hate it, it's not an efficient way to get what you want here.
Well,
to get me on your side, to get me whatever your goal is. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, conversation and dialogue are hard.
Oh yeah.
Conversation and dialogue are hard. That's not a remedy that's like a flip of a switch. And okay, everything's fine now.
You have to practice.
You have to practice it. It is a lifelong practice, or I'm going to use a word you don't like. A lifelong journey It's a lifelong journey of dialogue and conversation and learning from each other, seeing each other's differences, accepting each other's similarities, and trying to coexist together in a parallel way, not necessarily becoming one gobbledygook thing, but living together in one's diversity and including each other and moving forward and continuing to dialogue with one another to see where each other are at. The easy thing is to drop a bomb. I'm not saying it's easy because there's a lot of heartache that comes from that. There's a lot of decision making that comes from that. But dropping a bomb or just saying, all right, we're going to declare war, or going in vengeance or violence towards somebody, saying that nasty thing to the person because you just can't stand them. Saying those things. These things are, when I say easy, I'm not saying that they're necessarily easy to do, but they're quick fixes. They're quick fixes that actually a lot of times Samantha and I were on a walk this morning and we talked about that these little things that we do in our life that have negative connotations, like saying nasty things to people or having knee-jerk reactions to, instead of looking at diplomacy in the long game, we take the short game and we do things which it never ends up being good. And so, but dialogue takes time and it takes energy and it takes effort and it takes
it also takes a certain emotional maturity and living in this reality.
Yeah.
And here's what I mean. So what's true at a global scale is true at a personal scale, right? So like it's all to scale. What I mean is, if my daughter falls and scrapes her knee and she's bleeding and she's in pain and I run over to her and I say, "You're okay, you're okay, you're okay." What that is doing in her psyche is pulling apart her actual experience of the pain with, wait, maybe I'm wrong. My body's telling me I hurt, but somebody I love and trust is telling me, no, you're fine, everything's fine. It's not fine, I hurt. And it creates what's called cognitive dissonance. Space between what is true in reality and what I'm experiencing viscerally and what somebody is telling me is true. Somebody that's in a position that I should trust, right?
Correct.
That is true on a global and national scale as well. When we have presidents, I say plural because it keeps happening. When we drop a bomb, when we harm creation and other humans and the earth, because bombs also have an environmental impact that we don't talk about, whenever we do that, and I read it on the news, at a visceral level, I feel humanity is unsafe right now. We are having a hard time. I should be mourning and grieving something. I just can't quite put language to it. Maybe I don't have to. But then you have national leaders saying, we're safe, it's over, everything's fine. It's creating that same, they're in a position of power. I should be trusting them because they know more about this than I do. Do you know what I'm saying? Of like,
oh, I know exactly what you're
saying. It creates
saying.
this weird terror in me, and this is related to the horses and chariots, the weapons of war, because this is real. We've been experiencing it for thousands of years, as we know from the text that we shared today. But whenever we have leaders saying, no, our horses and chariots, they're fine and they're going to keep you safe, but then somehow I feel unsafe. I feel like something bad is happening and I should be grieving something, I should be mourning something, I should be praying for something, I should be doing humanitarian activism of some sort. I should be doing something to put this grieving energy out there somehow. But then we have someone else saying, no, everything's fine. It's very confusing. It's very difficult.
Well, right, and in the midst of this conflict in the Middle East, you can also see that the Jewish people who are living in Israel, in Jerusalem and beyond, that the Jewish people are in many ways upset and scared that others who are against them, which is not just one but a multitude, could obtain a nuclear weapon and annihilate them. That is an honest fear, and that should not be dismissed. and yet, at the same time, there are Palestinian people who are of Muslim background in both culture and religion. There is also a minority of Palestinian Christians who are living in that region, as well as many other people of different cultures and religions, and so it is. It is we should be very mindful, and there's no simple fix to this. Let's just be clear about that. I'm not saying, well, if we just do this, everything will be okay. That's not what I'm saying.
We're not giving a hot take or a
We're not giving a hot take.
But we are saying it's difficult.
But what we are saying is, if we can learn in the Jewish and Christian traditions, if we can focus on those, if you're in particular, and even the Muslim tradition has a very Abrahamic religions, the three of them, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, have all deep strands of seeking peace and being peacemakers. If we could focus on that and help deter radicalism in all three of those traditions, and focus on what is the long game here, not just bombing each other back and forth and cutting people off from food and, all these different types of things, telling people that you want to annihilate them. That's not the posture. The posture is the long game dialogue.
Yeah.
And how can we not focus? How can we focus on harmony and the divine spark in us all, as we're all made in the image of God, and less on the horses and chariots, how we can spend more money to have more, how we can press the button and let the bombs go, how we can withhold the money that we have from the military-industrial complex and not feed people or house people and try to, when I hear things like that, not only is bombing horrible and the killing of innocent people on all sides, that's disgusting. This idea of keeping people in one little area and starving them out, keeping them in hot places where they can't be housed, that is positively barbaric and medieval. Yeah. Keeping people out and starving them from the
Isn't there something interesting about the fact that it's actually very sad, but very interesting? You have these three Abrahamic religions. Christians fight. We all fight with each other more than we fight with Buddhists because we have more in common. And again, what's true on a global scale is true in our own lives. I'm thinking about some of the people who just rub me the wrong way, who I have a hard time around. It's because they're very similar to me.
Yeah, right.
We have more conflict with that which is similar to us than we do with something totally different.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So all this talk about differences and similarities, there's conflict and similarities too.
And there is conflicts between Hinduism and Buddhism.
Sure,
they have their own conflicts, but they're
scale.
slightly not to the scale, but they're also slightly, they have a different
right. It's almost as if conflict is part of the human experience, and we need to get right with how we engage with conflict, because the conflict itself is not going anywhere. The disagreements. I don't mean war conflict, but we all have different perspectives, so we need to figure out how to.
We need to figure out how to live together.
Right, it's a global economy anymore. It's not tribalism anymore.
Yeah.
Our brains are still tribal, but our outsides are not. How do we
this
reconcile?
comes from. I'm simplifying this, and I shouldn't, but this comes from, and this is a very masculine statement. I'm trying not to. I don't know how to.
Masculine's not.
Navigate this. A lot of these conflicts and things that are coming from, and again, this is an oversimplification, but is my muscles are bigger than yours. Mm-hmm. And I have it right and you have it wrong. And you don't have the right protein shake.
Yeah.
So, I don't know why I went there.
This goes to...
Hold on.
Go ahead.
I don't know why I went there. But, once again, when you study and you have dialogue in communities, plural, when you study and have dialogue in communities, and you look at all three of the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, you will see again the through line of focusing on peace and harmony, even in their differences. You can also find things, if you really look at them, that can move people off to one side and they can get tyrannical. That could be anywhere. But in the deepness of, I'm going to speak about the two, in the deep roots of Christianity and in the deep roots of Judaism, you will see that the Jewish prophets, time after time, have talked about not having horses and chariots and focusing on the goodness and connection of God that is in us all. Yeah. And with Jesus in the Christian tradition, who came out of the Jewish tradition, you will see many things. The one that I talked about from Zechariah and Matthew, again coming in on the donkey and not a war horse. But you also see in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 5-9, I just want to share one of these things. You see Jesus, you see the words of Jesus, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Blessed are the peacemakers, yeah. Jesus says. In Matthew 5, verses 44, he says, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." That doesn't mean you need to be a doormat. That doesn't mean you can't say, "I'm not going to accept this bad, tyrannical, evil behavior." And yet, at the same time, you're called to be in prayerful dialogue with those who persecute you in order for the long game so that you can live together. Jesus literally disarms Peter in the Garden of Gethsemane when Peter, during what we now know as Holy Week, cuts off the ear of the Roman soldier, some think Romans, a type of soldier, a type of military official, and says, "Those who live by the sword will die by the sword." That's in Matthew chapter 26, verses 52. And even in the early church, after Jesus had been dead, 50, 100, 200 years, the early Christians, lots of writings about the early Christians, about being a little slightly apprehensive of even serving in the military or any type of violence. That eventually evolved over time, but this kind of deep, non-violent practices of Jesus and in Jesus's teachings. And we see this, even we talked about this actually on the last episode. We see that in Ephesians, Paul writes in chapter 6, verses 11 through 13, to put on the armor of God. The armor of God isn't armor with a real sword and a real breastplate and a real helmet.
Right,
they are
flipping the military language.
Flipping the military language and talking about prayer and community and dialogue and engaging with the writings of the scriptures and the prophets, engaging in community through the sacraments a new way.
Yes.
A new way. And so,
but I think you're on to something. Can I?
Hold on.
Go ahead.
And then, so we have all that. And then in the Middle Ages, you get the Crusades. And we should do an episode on that. Because once again, just like many of the kings of Israel and others lost their way and didn't listen to what was prescribed for the long game. And people could say, yeah, well, are you cherry picking? Because there's other things that are prescribed and you don't follow them. But we could talk about that. There's nuances. But this is a clear through line. A clear through line of nonviolence and calling it out.
Yeah.
And not with horses and chariots, but calling it out in a different way. You get to the Crusades and once again lost their way.
Yeah.
Christians and Muslims lost their way and they had to reorient themselves. Yeah. So time and time again, it is important to live in the the through line that is being engaged in the stories of history through the scriptures, that's being engaged in the communal acts through sacraments, and also in dialogue with one another. Again, seeing each other's differences and embracing each other's similarities.
Mm-hmm.
Moving forward, not through horses and chariots, but
through meeting people
where they're at and seeing them as people in the image of God, even though sometimes their behavior is not relaying that.
But I want to rewind a little bit, because we were talking about competition, and then you were talking about masculinity a little bit, and I want to talk about
the right protein shake.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think that you were onto something. This can kind of be our conclusion here, is that we need to remember that the backdrop of Scripture is empire. It's always empire operating in the background, or God's people becoming empire and being knocked down from it, because that's not what's supposed to happen. It just seems like that's what's happening over and over. You're freed from the horses and chariots. God destroys the horses and chariots with the Red Sea. Now, don't have too many horses and chariots yourself. We're going to try this new thing here. We're doing this, like, we're taking humanity somewhere else. And by the way, that is exactly what the Jewish people did. They pulled all of humanity in a very different direction, right?
Right.
And then now they have the horses, all the horses and chariots, and they are the empire, and they're being condemned, right, by God and by prophets. And then they're knocked down. Like, now they are oppressed again. You're conquered by the Roman Empire. And now Christianity comes on the scene. And now Christians, once again, we are the ones with the horses and chariots overwhelmingly. We are the ones, again, like, we just keep doing it. And there's something about this dominance and this competition and this masculinity that I'm thinking about. And I talk about masculinity with, like, real empathy for it. Maybe sympathy is a better word. But in the Roman Empire, the backdrop of the Gospels of the New Testament, there's the Roman Empire, right? They have conquered God's people. They have conquered the Israelites. And the word vir, V-I-R, means man. And you are not born a man. You have to earn your manhood in this culture, right? We're talking about the Roman Empire. And you have to earn it. And how do you earn it? One way is you fight in the gladiator fights.
Right.
And if you die, then you die for Rome, and you die a man, right? You die in glory, you die a man.
And a martyr.
You die a vir, and a martyr, right? Again, right, even that word martyr, there's another one I have so many words to add to our list. But you die a man. Or you fight in the gladiator fights and you win. And now you're a man because you won for Rome. If you die for Rome, you're a man. You earn that manhood status and you die a man fighting for Rome. If you win, you're a man, but you don't get to keep that manly status. You have to keep coming back and
it's a merit-based system.
Yes, if you win once, that's not enough. There's glory for a little while, but you have to keep striving. And we, in the United States and the Western world, we are a masculine. We come from masculine descendants. We are masculine facing, do you know what I mean? Society.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So although I'm a woman, I was conditioned in masculinity, which means we were all taught to keep striving, keep winning, keep dominating in order to earn our status. Men especially, I'm sensitive to it, they have to just keep proving themselves over and over. And then what happens, these men rise to positions of global power, and they're just fighting. So it's essentially just global gladiator fights of, like, let me show you that I'm strong and I'm worthy and I deserve to be here. And I want to earn my status. I want to earn my keep. I want to earn my space. And that's why the theology about grace is so radical. It's become just a cliche, but it's actually really radical. And it's something I have to learn over and over again. I've told on different episodes about how I just keep creating these ladders for myself. I want to get my doctorate. I want to publish a book. And I keep doing it. And I'm on the other side of this striving, and I still feel unworthy, so then I just have to prove myself more and more and more and more, and we're all doing it. I know very few people who are actually liberated from this vir, this status seeking whatever we have decided or have been conditioned to believe status is, for a lot of complicated reasons. Some of us it's achievement, some of it's a nice body and exercise and eating well, some of it money, some of it is dominance, right? Some of it is like, how many women can I date? How many men can I date? Like, we all have a different thing that we have been taught gives us status in this world, and we just keep trying to one up ourselves, and we come on the other end of it and we're still not feeling good enough. There is no end. So this horses and chariots, go ahead.
Well, no, I'm just saying, you can see this actually quite a bit. It's getting somewhat better, but even because culture and society have been so dominated by the patriarchy and by male leadership, when women do come in and get elected to public office, whether that's local, state, or federal, specifically state and federal, because that has to do with looking at things like national defense and military and all that kind of stuff, foreign policy. You have two things. You have people who are hawkish and people who are dovish when it comes to defense and foreign policy. And if you're a hawk, that is a very strong, masculine, dominant understanding and policy when it comes to foreign policy and defense. If you're a hawk, you have a hawkish foreign policy. You have a hawkish defense policy. If you're a dove, it's a more softer diplomacy, peace before war. Doesn't mean that it can't get there, but you start. And many, many women have been conditioned by the men in the state legislatures and in Congress in order to be in line with the men, women have taken on a hawkish foreign policy, a hawkish defense policy, because men have told them, you're a woman, and you need to look strong and mighty when it comes to defense.
But this is true in every category of life.
Absolutely.
I was taught in high school and college, when you go interview for jobs, you don't wear hot pink. You don't wear your hair in a high pony.
You wear a pantsuit.
You don't have pink lipstick. Nothing feminine. You wear black, navy, like what our culture has decided is masculine. You don't have bright nail polish. In fact, I was actually told, take the nail polish off altogether. In order to have a position of any kind of power or autonomy in this world, you need to be masculine about it. And then you have Taylor Swift come along, and she's girly pop, and she's like, watch me. I'm going to wear glitter, and I'm going to wear tank tops, and I'm going to wear pink, and I'm still going to dominate, essentially, this field, this arena.
And you do have other women serving in public office who have felt the same. They have taken on a strong position on many issues, and they also fully, they're also fully in line in being who they are in their femininity. They don't morph into
the
this.
The lines are beginning to blur.
Yeah, they don't morph into this static, patriarchal kind of male-dominated place that they feel like they have to be. Yeah.
So I thought this was going to be like a 35-minute episode. We're at 1:17, which is pretty on par with what we're usually at. But all of that is to say, if you want to live a Christian life, there's a lot of ways to do that. There's a lot of interpretations. The way Dillon and I see it, and many other Christians see it pretty clearly, as we've demonstrated biblically, as we've talked about with empire in the background, all these things, is domination and winning at all costs and protecting yourself at all costs. There's a tension to be held there, but that's not the way. Early Jesus followers, they were called the way. You can see that Paul talks about it sometimes, the way, people of the way, right? Before Christianity formally existed. If you want to be part of the way, it's non-violent. It's talking about when violence does happen, because it seems to be embedded in this human existence. When violence does happen, it's not being proud of the weapons of war that protect you. your pride should not be with the horses and chariots, as Psalm 20 says. It should be with God. It should be with this way that we are walking.
Yeah, absolutely. And for my closing, St. Paul writes in Romans chapter 12, verses 21, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good.
Yeah. There you go.
No horses, no chariots.
Yeah. Stay curious.
Stay curious.
To understand the mystery, first take a look at the history. The words we use will give us clues, so